The champagne glass trembled in my hand. Just slightly. Not enough for anyone else to notice, but I felt it. That tiny earthquake running through my fingers as my husband's voice cut through the crystal laughter of Manhattan's elite. Long enough for pity to turn into habit. The words hung in the air like smoke. Around us, the top floor of Helix Tower glittered with money and power. City lights stretched endlessly below, 1,000 tiny fires that couldn't touch the cold spreading through my chest. Someone laughed. Then another. The sound rippled outward like a stone thrown into still water, each wave pulling me further under. Adrian stood there, perfectly lit by the chandelier above, his smile wide and easy. That same smile that had once made my heart race now made my stomach turn. He wasn't looking at me. He never really looked at me anymore. I was just part of the scenery, like the ice sculptures melting slowly in the corner. Beautiful once, now just water running down marble. Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family, enjoy the story. 20 years. That's how long I'd been standing beside this man. 20 years of watching my words leave my mouth and come back out of his, repackaged as genius. 20 years of designing buildings that won awards with his name engraved on them. 20 years of being the woman who smiled at parties while he told stories about his empire. The one I'd helped build brick by invisible brick. The silver gown he'd picked out for me caught the light as I raised my glass. Subtle, he'd called it. Code for invisible. Code for quiet. Code for stay in your place, Celeste. But something inside me had already moved. 2 months ago, I'd been sorting through tax documents in our home office. Just routine paperwork. The kind of boring task Adrian never bothered with because he had bigger things to handle. That's when I saw it, an email thread, buried in a shared folder he'd forgotten to lock. His CFO's name. Numbers that didn't make sense. Offshore accounts. Shell companies. The kind of financial architecture that could bring down everything he'd spent decades building. My first instinct was fear. My second was something darker, sharper. Something that had been growing in the shadows of our marriage, fed by every dismissive comment, every stolen idea, every public humiliation disguised as a joke. Clarity. I hadn't confronted him. Hadn't mentioned it at all. Instead, I'd started making phone calls. Quiet ones. The kind you make from coffee shops 3 neighborhoods away, using a number he didn't know existed. I'd reached out to his investors, the ones who'd worked with me directly on design projects, who'd seen what I could do when Adrian wasn't taking credit for it. They listened. Really listened. Not the polite half-attention Adrian always gave me, but genuine interest. Because they were tired too. Tired of his ego. Tired of his mistakes. Tired of cleaning up messes while he collected applause. Now, standing in this room full of people who thought they knew me, I lifted my champagne higher. The bubbles caught the light, tiny explosions of gold against glass. Well, dear, I said, my voice steady despite the fire building in my chest. Even habits can be broken. A few people shifted uncomfortably. Adrian smirked, thinking I was playing along with his joke. Thinking I was still the woman who bent and bowed and smiled through the pain. He had no idea I'd already broken free. In my purse, tucked between lipstick and keys, was a contract. Signed 3 days ago in a lawyer's office downtown. A contract that would change everything. Adrian's business partners, the ones he'd dismissed and disrespected for years, had agreed to something beautiful. Something he'd never see coming. They were backing me. Not him. Me. I watched Adrian turn back to his audience, already moving on to another story, another moment where he could be the center of attention. He didn't notice me slip away from the champagne bar. Didn't see me walk toward the windows overlooking the city he thought he owned. My reflection stared back at me in the glass, a woman in silver, invisible by design. But behind my eyes, something burned bright and dangerous. Let him laugh. Let him think he'd won. In 7 days, his name would be stripped from the building behind us. In 7 days, the company he'd built on my silence would belong to someone else. It would belong to me. I pressed my hand against the cold window, watching my breath fog the glass. Down below, the city pulsed with life. Millions of people fighting their own battles, carrying their own secrets. Somewhere down there, my lawyer was filing paperwork. My new investors were transferring funds. The wheels were already turning. Adrian's voice drifted over, loud and confident. The secret to success, he was saying, is knowing when to hold on and when to let go. I smiled at my reflection. He was about to learn that lesson the hard way. Because while he'd been busy performing, I'd been building. While he'd been taking credit, I'd been making connections. While he'd been laughing at me, I'd been planning his fall. The party continued behind me, music, laughter, the clink of expensive glasses. But I wasn't part of it anymore. I was somewhere else already, standing in an office that would soon be mine, signing documents that would rewrite everything. Adrian thought tonight was his celebration. He had no idea it was my beginning. What would you do if the person who promised to build an empire with you spent 20 years tearing you down instead? The roses arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. 12 white blooms, perfect and pristine, arranged in crystal that probably cost more than my monthly rent. I was 26, sitting in my cramped office at Brighton Design Consultants, surrounded by fabric swatches and blueprint corrections that nobody else wanted to handle. The card was simple. Heavy paper, expensive ink. Every empire needs an architect. I didn't know who sent them. Not until he walked into our presentation 3 days later. Adrian Rowan moved through rooms like he owned the oxygen. 6 feet tall, dark hair starting to silver at the temples, wearing a suit that probably cost what I made in 2 months. He didn't just enter our conference room, he commanded it. Our senior partners practically tripped over themselves to shake his hand. I was there to present a waterfront renovation concept. Something I'd worked on for weeks, perfecting every angle, every detail. But the moment Adrian's eyes landed on me, something shifted in the air. "You're the architect," he said. Not a question. A statement. My boss jumped in quickly. "Miss Rowan here is one of our junior consultants. I'd like to hear from her directly." Adrian's smile was warm but absolute. The kind of smile that made saying no impossible. So, I presented. And for the first time in my career, someone actually listened. Not just nodded politely while checking their phone, really listened. He asked questions that showed he understood not just the surface but the foundation underneath. When I finished, he stood up and applauded. "That's the most intelligent design proposal I've heard in 5 years, he said. "Who else worked on this with you?" "No one," I answered. "It's mine." Something flickered in his eyes. Respect, maybe, or recognition. "Then you're wasted here." 6 weeks later, we had our first date. 3 months after that, he proposed on the rooftop of a building I'd helped him redesign. The ring was platinum and diamonds, catching the sunset like captured fire. "Build an empire with me," he whispered against my hair. I said yes. The wedding was everything I'd never wanted. Big, loud, full of his business contacts and people I'd never met. But I told myself that's what love looked like at this level. Compromise. Adaptation. Being part of something bigger than myself. Our honeymoon was in Monaco. He spent most of it on conference calls while I sketched building facades in a notebook he never asked to see. When we returned, I moved into his penthouse, our penthouse now, and started working on his projects full-time. That's when things began to change. The first time he took credit for my work, I thought it was a mistake. We were pitching to investors for a mixed-use development in Brooklyn. I'd spent 3 weeks perfecting the design, balancing residential flow with commercial accessibility. During the presentation, Adrian stood up and walked through every detail I'd created, using my exact words, my reasoning, my vision. "This is the future of urban living," he declared, gesturing at my renderings. The investors applauded. One of them turned to me and said, "You must be so proud of your husband." I smiled. What else could I do? Afterward, in the car, I brought it up gently. "I noticed you didn't mention I designed the Brooklyn project." He looked confused. "We're married now, Celeste. What's mine is yours. What's yours is mine. We're building together, remember?" It sounded reasonable, loving even. So I swallowed my discomfort and told myself he was right. But it kept happening. My Chelsea renovation became his Chelsea renovation. My waterfront vision became his waterfront vision. Slowly, project by project, my name disappeared from the work while his grew larger. When people asked what I did, Adrian would smile and say, "She keeps me grounded." Every successful man needs someone to come home to. 5 years in, I stopped attending project meetings. He said it was because investors took him more seriously alone, that having me there made things seem less professional. 10 years in, I stopped designing altogether. He needed me to focus on hosting dinners, managing our social calendar, being the perfect wife who made him look good. 15 years in, I barely recognized myself. I remembered one particularly brutal dinner party. Adrian's business partner made a joke about architecture, getting the details completely wrong. I corrected him politely, explaining the actual engineering principles involved. Adrian laughed, loud enough to stop conversation. "Honey, let's leave the technical talk to people who actually work in the field." His partner looked embarrassed. For me, I excused myself to the bathroom and stared at my reflection for 10 minutes, trying to remember the woman who'd once commanded boardrooms. She was gone. Erased. Painted over like a mistake. That night, lying in bed while Adrian snored beside me, I overheard him on a late call I wasn't supposed to hear. His voice drifted through the bathroom door. "She's beautiful, not brilliant. But that's fine. I need someone stable at home while I handle the real work." The words hit like ice water. Beautiful, not brilliant. 20 years of my life distilled into 6 words that dismissed everything I'd ever been.
I didn't sleep that night.
Instead, I sat in our home office, surrounded by files and folders of projects I'd helped build but no longer owned. My hands shook as I opened his laptop, the one he always left unlocked because he thought I'd never look. I was searching for old design files. Something to remind myself I'd once been capable of more than arranging seating charts. That's when I found the email. "Have you ever discovered something that changed your life in a single moment?" The subject line was simple. Came in transfer complete. My finger hovered over the trackpad. This wasn't my business. These weren't my files. But something made me click anyway, maybe curiosity, maybe the echo of those 6 words still ringing in my head. Beautiful, not brilliant. The email opened. Numbers filled the screen. Dates, account codes, transfer amounts that made my stomach drop. Adrian's CFO had sent this 3 months ago, confirming movement of funds through a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands. The kind of financial architecture designed for one purpose, hiding money from people who had the right to see it. I scrolled down. More emails. A thread going back 2 years. Discussions about restructuring and offshore optimization and other phrases that sounded legitimate until you actually understood what they meant. Tax evasion. That's what this was. Dressed up in business language but still fraud. My hands went cold. Part of me wanted to close the laptop immediately, pretend I'd never seen it. That would be easier. Safer. That would be what the old Celeste would do, the one who'd spent 20 years making herself smaller. But I didn't close it. Instead, I opened a new folder and started copying files. Every email, every document, every piece of evidence that showed exactly what Adrian had been hiding while building his legitimate empire. It took 3 hours. By the time I finished, dawn was breaking over Manhattan, turning the sky outside our windows the color of old bruises. Adrian was still asleep, oblivious. He'd always slept well, the sleep of someone who never questioned whether he deserved what he had. I saved everything to a flash drive I'd bought with cash 2 weeks earlier. Then I deleted my browsing history and closed the laptop exactly how I'd found it. The next morning, I made Adrian breakfast like always. Eggs the way he liked them. Coffee exactly the right temperature. I smiled when he kissed my cheek before leaving for the office. "See you tonight," he called from the elevator. "See you," I answered. But I wasn't the same woman he'd left. Something fundamental had shifted overnight. I'd found his weakness. His vulnerability. The crack in the empire he'd built on my silence. Now I just had to decide what to do with it. The first person I called was Marcus Webb. He'd worked with Adrian 5 years ago on a residential tower project, my design, Adrian's name. But Marcus had always been kind to me. He'd seen through the performance, recognized that the ideas came from somewhere deeper than Adrian's ego. We met at a coffee shop in Queens. Neutral territory, far from anyone who might recognize us. "I need your honest opinion about something," I said, sliding into the booth across from him. Marcus stirred his coffee slowly. "About Adrian." It wasn't a question. He already knew. "How bad is it?" I asked. He studied my face for a long moment. "You really want to know?" "I really need to know." Marcus leaned back, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. He's leveraged beyond anything rational. 3 properties underwater, loans he can't service, investors he's been stringing along with promises. The only thing keeping his company afloat is reputation, and that's starting to crack. How much does he need to stay solvent? Conservative estimate? 15 million in fresh capital within 6 months. Otherwise, the whole thing collapses. The number hung between us. 15 million. More money than I could imagine. But also, I realized with a sharp clarity exactly the kind of amount his offshore accounts held. What if someone else could bring that capital? I asked carefully. Marcus's eyes narrowed. Someone like who? Someone the investors actually trust. Understanding dawned across his face.
Celeste.
Are you thinking what I think you're thinking? I didn't answer directly. If Adrian's company was going to fail anyway, wouldn't it be better if someone competent took over? Someone who actually understood design and development? Someone who wouldn't run it into the ground. Someone like you. Someone like me. Marcus whistled low. That's dangerous. Adrian wouldn't just lose his company. He'd lose everything. He already lost the one thing that mattered. I said quietly. Integrity. We sat in silence for a moment. Then Marcus pulled out his phone. There's someone you should meet. Adrian's lawyer, Leland Muir. He's been with Adrian 15 years, but lately, he trailed off. Lately what? Lately, he's been asking questions. The kind of questions lawyers ask when they're worried about being implicated in something illegal. 2 days later, I sat across from Leland in a different coffee shop. He looked tired, older than his 50 years. His suit was expensive but rumpled, like he'd been wearing it too long. Marcus says you have concerns. I started carefully. Leland laughed, but there was no humor in it. Concerns? That's diplomatic. He pulled out a folder, sliding it across the table. I've been Adrian's attorney for 15 years. I've watched him build an empire. But I've also watched him cut corners, bend rules, and lately, break them entirely. I opened the folder. Inside were documents I recognized, some from Adrian's laptop, others I'd never seen. Tax filings that didn't match actual revenue. Loan applications with inflated asset values. Contracts with signatures that looked questionable. Why are you showing me this? I asked. Because I'm 53 years old with a daughter starting college and a reputation I've spent my life building. And I'm not going to prison because Adrian Rowan thinks rules don't apply to him. Leland's voice was steady but intense. He's one mistake away from a federal audit. And when that happens, everyone connected to him goes down. Including you. Including me. Unless someone with actual ethics takes control before that happens. I closed the folder slowly. What exactly are you suggesting? Leland leaned forward. I'm suggesting that you're the only person who can save this company. You have the skills, the vision, and if I'm reading this situation correctly, the motivation. Adrian's partners are tired of him. His investors are nervous. And his lawyer is looking for an exit strategy that doesn't involve a courtroom. I'd need backing. Real backing. I can help with that. I know every investor in Adrian's network. Most of them have worked with you directly. They know your work, even if your name wasn't on it.
He paused.
They also know Adrian's a disaster waiting to happen. If you approach them with a legitimate plan to take over, they'd listen. They'd do more than listen, Celeste. They'd jump at the chance. My heart was pounding. This was real. Actually possible. Not just a fantasy born from humiliation, but a genuine path forward. There's one more thing, Leland said, pulling out another document. This is a filing for a new holding company. I took the liberty of drafting it already. All it needs is your signature. I looked at the paper. The name at the top made my breath catch. CR Design Holdings. My initials. My company. My empire. One mistake away from collapse. I repeated Leland's earlier words. He nodded. One mistake. Or one brilliant move. I picked up the pen. What would you risk to reclaim everything that was stolen from you? The signature looked strange on the page. 20 years of signing cards and checks as Celeste Rowan, Adrian's wife, Adrian's appendage. Now here was my name on something that belonged only to me. The first investor meeting happened 3 days later. Daniel Chin, who'd partnered with Adrian on a waterfront development 2 years ago. My design, Adrian's credit. But Daniel remembered who'd actually solved the zoning nightmare that almost killed the project. We met at his office in Tribeca. Glass walls, minimalist furniture, a view of the Hudson that cost more than most people's houses. Celeste, he greeted me warmly. This is unexpected. Does Adrian know you're here? Adrian doesn't know a lot of things, I said, settling into the chair across from his desk. That's actually why I'm here. Daniel's expression shifted. Curious now. Cautious. I'd rehearsed this moment 100 times. You've worked with my husband for 5 years. In that time, how many projects have failed? How many deals has he mishandled? How many times have you had to step in and fix his mistakes? Daniel didn't answer immediately. He didn't have to. We both knew the truth. Adrian has vision, he said carefully. But execution has always been messy, I finished. Because vision without structure is just chaos. And Adrian's been relying on other people to provide that structure while he takes the applause. People like you. People like me. I pulled out my portfolio. Years of work I'd kept copies of, annotated with my original notes, my solutions, my designs. Everything Adrian's built, the developments that actually succeeded, started here. With these plans. My plans. Daniel leaned forward, studying the documents. I watched recognition flash across his face as he saw familiar projects in their original form before Adrian had watered them down or taken credit. The Brooklyn mixed use, he murmured. That was yours. Every detail. The residential flow, the commercial integration, the parking solution that saved you $3 million in construction costs. Mine. He looked up at me. Why are you showing me this? Because Adrian's company is failing. You know it, I know it, everyone knows it. He needs fresh capital to stay solvent, but he's burned too many bridges. Investors are pulling back because they don't trust him anymore. And you think they'd trust you? I think they'd trust competence over ego. Results over reputation. I slid another document across his desk. This is a proposal for CR Design Holdings to acquire controlling interest in Rowan Global Developments. You'd maintain your current investment percentages, but under new management. Ethical management. Profitable management. Daniel read through the proposal silently. I could see him calculating, weighing risks against opportunities. Finally, he looked up. Adrian would never agree to this. Adrian won't have a choice. I've spoken with Leland Muir. He's prepared to facilitate the transition. And I have documentation of financial irregularities that would trigger an audit if they became public. You're blackmailing your own husband. I'm saving his company from federal investigation. I kept my voice level. This isn't about revenge, Daniel. It's about survival. His company fails in 6 months without intervention. With me in charge, it thrives. Everyone wins except Adrian's ego. Daniel studied me for a long moment. I could see him reassessing everything he thought he knew about me. The quiet wife. The shadow beside the spotlight. The woman who smiled at parties and never caused problems. That woman was gone. I'll need to see your full business plan, he said finally. Financial projections, restructuring timeline, management team. I have everything ready. Can we meet tomorrow? He smiled. Small, but genuine. Tomorrow works. I left his office, knowing I'd won the first battle. But this was war, and Adrian had other allies. I needed more than one investor on my side. The next 3 weeks were a blur of coffee meetings and lunch presentations. Investors I'd met at Adrian's parties, developers who'd worked on projects I designed, business partners who'd seen firsthand how Adrian operated. I approached each one with the same message: competence over chaos, structure over ego, a future that actually worked.
Most said yes.
Some hesitated.
A few said no.
But by the end of week 3, I had silent backing from enough key players to secure majority control. Adrian noticed nothing. He was too busy being Adrian, making grand pronouncements at board meetings, entertaining clients with stories about his genius, planning his next big party. He came home late most nights, barely looking at me, already on his phone planning the next day's performances. One evening, I was reviewing contracts at the dining table when he walked past, glancing at my paperwork. "Still playing businesswoman?" he said, amusement in his voice. "Just reviewing some investments," I answered calmly.
He laughed.
"Investments? That's cute." He poured himself scotch from the bar. "You know what someone said to me today? They said their wife wants to start a business. I told them, let her. It'll keep her busy and out of your way." They loved that. He walked off, scotch in hand, already scrolling through his phone. I looked down at the contract in front of me. It was the final investor agreement, requiring only my signature to activate. Once I signed, there was no going back. The takeover would be inevitable. My hand moved across the page, signature flowing smooth and certain. The next morning, Adrian's lawyer called him for a friendly chat. That afternoon, his accountant requested an urgent meeting. By evening, his top 3 investors had all sent cryptic emails asking to discuss new opportunities. "Something's off," Adrian muttered at dinner, staring at his phone. "Everyone's acting strange." "Maybe they're just busy," I suggested, cutting my chicken with careful precision. He looked at me, then really looked for the first time in months. "You seem different."
"Do I?"
"Happier, maybe. More confident." I smiled. "Maybe I'm just finally comfortable in my own skin." He grunted and went back to his phone, already dismissing me. Already missing the warning signs. The next day, I had lunch with his PR director. The day after, coffee with his CFO. Piece by piece, I was dismantling his support system, not through force but through simple truth. Adrian was sinking, and they could either go down with him or climb onto something solid. Most chose solid ground. 2 weeks before Adrian's birthday party, the night he'd mock me in front of everyone, I received the final document. It sat on my desk in my new office, the one I'd rented quietly using my own money. The document was simple: transfer of controlling shares to CR Design Holdings, pending final board approval. Everything was ready. All I needed was the right moment. Adrian himself gave it to me. At his birthday party, surrounded by crystal and champagne and people who thought they mattered, he reduced me to a joke. A habit. Something tolerated out of pity.
The room laughed.
And I knew exactly what I had to do. Standing by that window, watching the city pulse below, I made my final decision. Monday morning, the paperwork would be filed. By Monday afternoon, everything would change. Adrian's business partner walked up beside me, drink in hand. "Beautiful view," he said. "It really is," I agreed. "Though I think it'll look even better from the top." The elevator rose like a slow countdown to rebirth. 42 floors, one for every year I'd been quiet, erased, reshaped into someone's shadow. When the doors opened, I stepped out not as Adrian Rowan's wife, but as the woman who'd finally stopped waiting to be seen. "Mrs. Rowan," his assistant stammered. "I'm not here for him." I walked past her and into his corner office, the one he'd built to intimidate, lined with leather, mahogany, and lies. Awards, photographs, all celebrating his genius. None of them included me, though half those achievements were mine. I set my briefcase on his desk and watched Manhattan stretch endlessly beyond the glass. 20 years of silence ended here. Marcus Webb appeared in the doorway, breathless. "Celeste, your lawyer just emailed the board. Emergency meeting. 10 o'clock. Conference room A." "For what?" "Change of management." He paled. I didn't let them panic. Adrian had ruled through fear and confusion. Today, I'd return the favor. By 9:30, I heard his laugh echoing through the hall. That easy charm that had fooled the world. The door swung open. Playing executive, he teased. Sitting in my office, I said. He chuckled until he saw my eyes. What are you talking about? You'll find out at 10. He started to protest, then stopped. He felt it, the control slipping. This isn't about the party, I told him, standing. Though it did make the timing easier. Don't be late to your reckoning. I left him there, still clinging to the illusion that his world was intact. The boardroom was full by 10. Confusion. Unease. Adrian stormed in, demanding answers. It's not your company anymore, said Leland Muir, our lawyer. As of this morning, controlling interest in Rowan Global Developments belongs to CR Design Holdings. CR? Adrian blinked. That's her. 52% of shares, I said. Acquired legally. Every document in order. The room erupted. Adrian shouted about theft until Leland slid a folder across the table. Offshore accounts. Fraudulent filings. Shell companies. Need I continue? He went pale. His own signatures stared back at him from the page. You built this company on deception, I said. If it goes public, everyone falls with you. Or we change course.
Now.
The investors looked at one another, then at my restructuring plan. 5 years of rebuilding. Transparency. Real leadership. The kind Adrian had never offered. The vote took 5 minutes. 7-4. None against. Adrian's face collapsed. Celeste, please. You're removed from all operations. You keep a minor stake. No voting rights. Security will escort you out. This is my building. I said. The guard stepped forward. For the first time in 20 years, he looked small. You won't survive without me, he said. You needed the world to believe in you, I replied. I just needed to believe in myself. The door closed behind him. Silence. Then Leland again. The Penthouse. Legally joint, but we recommend full transfer to Mrs. Rowan. Make it happen, I said. That afternoon, I stood in what used to be his office, now mine, and watched workers strip his name from the building. Tomorrow, new letters would rise. CR Design Holdings. My phone buzzed. A message from Adrian. This isn't over. But it was.
He just couldn't see it yet.
Outside, the city blazed with twilight. Somewhere below, he was packing boxes, realizing too late that the empire he'd built was never truly his. The laughter that once filled rooms had turned into whispers of disbelief. Quiet justice, the kind that doesn't need to shout. I hadn't destroyed him. I'd simply stopped holding him up. My assistant appeared. Mrs. Rowan? The movers are ready for the penthouse. Mrs. Rowan. The name sounded different now, no longer a belonging, but a title of ownership. I'll be there soon, I said. I want one last walkthrough. Alone again, I let a small smile break through. 20 years of invisibility, undone by a single morning. 20 years of being dismissed, avenged by competence and calm. From the window, the city glowed, every building a reflection of what I'd reclaimed. Somewhere out there, Adrian was tasting humility for the first time. Have you ever watched someone realize too late what they had? The penthouse keys felt heavy in my hand. Heavier than they should have been, like they carried the weight of 20 years instead of just metal and plastic. I stood outside the door, my door now, listening to the silence on the other side. This was the place where I'd disappeared, where I'd become smaller and quieter until I was barely visible even to myself. But that woman was gone. The one walking through this door was someone else entirely. I pushed it open. The movers had already taken most of Adrian's belongings. Empty spaces marked where his golf clubs used to stand, where his awards had lined the shelves. The leather chair he loved was gone. His expensive Scotch collection vanished. What remained was just space, clean, open, waiting to be filled with something better. I walked through rooms that felt familiar and foreign at the same time. The living room where we'd hosted countless dinners, where I'd smiled until my face ached while Adrian told stories that erased me. The office where I'd found those emails, the ones that started everything. The bedroom where I'd lain awake so many nights wondering how I'd become so invisible. My phone buzzed. A message from Daniel Chin. Board meeting tomorrow at 9. We need to discuss the Tribeca project. Your vision for it. Your vision. Not Adrian's.
Mine.
I typed back quickly. I'll be there. Another message came through. This one from Adrian. We need to talk. Please. I stared at those words for a long moment. Part of me, the part that had loved him once, back when I was 26 and believed in white roses and empire building, wanted to answer. Wanted to hear what he had to say. But the stronger part, the part that had signed documents and faced down boardrooms and reclaimed everything he'd stolen, knew better. Some conversations don't deserve to happen. Some people don't earn closure. I deleted the message without responding. That evening, I ordered takeout from a Thai place I'd always loved but Adrian hated. I ate it on the balcony, watching the city lights flicker to life below. From up here, Manhattan looked like a circuit board. Millions of connections, millions of lives intersecting and diverging. Somewhere down there, Adrian was eating dinner alone in whatever temporary place he'd found. Somewhere down there, people who'd mocked me were hearing the news and reassessing everything they thought they knew. I raised my wine glass to the skyline, to new beginnings. The next morning, I arrived at CR Design Holdings, my company, my name on the building, at 7:30. Early enough to prepare, late enough to prove I didn't need to overcompensate. The receptionist smiled warmly when I entered. Good morning, Ms. Rowan. Coffee's already in your office. Ms. Rowan. Not Mrs., just mine. The Tribeca project meeting started exactly on time. 7 investors, 3 architects, 2 city planning consultants. All of them waiting to hear what I had to say. No one checking their phones. No one looking past me to find someone more important. They were looking at me. I presented the redesign I'd been working on for weeks. A mixed-use development that balanced residential needs with commercial sustainability. Green spaces integrated throughout. Community areas that actually served the community. It was everything Adrian's version hadn't been. Thoughtful, ethical, beautiful. When I finished, the room was silent for exactly 3 seconds. Then Daniel started clapping. The others joined in. This is exactly what we needed, one of the architects said. This is brilliant. Brilliant. Not beautiful. Brilliant. I smiled. Let's make it happen. That afternoon, I got a call from a journalist. Some business reporter who'd heard about the takeover and wanted the story behind the story. I almost declined. But then I thought about all the years I'd stayed quiet, let Adrian control the narrative, let him define who I was. I'll give you 20 minutes, I said. We met at a coffee shop downtown. She was young, eager, recorder already out before I sat down. So, Celeste Rowan, you just pulled off one of the most dramatic corporate takeovers in Manhattan real estate history. How does it feel? Like breathing, I answered honestly. She looked confused. Breathing? Like finally being able to breathe after holding your breath for 20 years. The interview ran in the business section 3 days later. They used my favorite quote. I didn't destroy my husband's empire. I stopped holding it together while he pretended he built it alone. My phone exploded with messages. Some supportive, some shocked, some angry. Adrian's friends calling me ruthless, vindictive, cruel. But mixed in were other messages. Women I'd never met, telling me their own stories of erasure and silence. Thanking me for showing them what was possible. One message stood out. From Adrian's partner's wife, the one who'd been there the night he mocked me. I should have said something that night. I'm sorry I laughed. You're my hero now. I saved that one. A week later, the final paperwork came through. The penthouse was legally, completely, totally mine. Every square foot, every window, every memory erased and rebuilt. I signed the documents in my office, surrounded by windows overlooking a city that finally felt like it had room for me. That night, I threw a party. Not like Adrian's parties. No crystal chandeliers, no pretentious wine, no performances. Just people I actually liked eating good food and talking about real things. My new team from CR Design Holdings. Leland, who'd helped make everything possible. Daniel and the other investors who'd believed in me when belief was risky. No one mocked anyone. No one tried to be the biggest person in the room. We just existed together, celebrating something genuine. Near the end of the night, Marcus pulled me aside. You know, Adrian's been calling me, asking if there's any way back. And what did you tell him? I told him some bridges once burned, stay burned.
He paused.
He asked about you. If you seemed happy. What did you say? Marcus smiled. I said you seemed free. After everyone left, I stood on the balcony alone. The same balcony where Adrian had entertained his so-called friends. The same view, but everything different. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to Adrian's last message, the one I deleted. There was a new one. Just 3 words. I'm sorry, Celeste. Too little. Too late. 20 years too late. I blocked his number and set my phone down. Below, the city hummed with late-night energy. Somewhere down there, in an apartment 3 floors below, Adrian could see my lights burning. Could see the name CR Design Holdings glowing on the building he used to think he owned. Quiet justice, I thought again. The kind that doesn't scream. The kind that just exists, evident in the way the world rearranges itself around truth instead of lies. I raised my glass one more time to the skyline. This one's for every woman who was told she wasn't enough. For every voice that was silenced. For every brilliant mind that was called beautiful instead. The city lights twinkled back, like they were listening, like they understood. And somewhere below, Adrian turned off his lights and went to bed, knowing tomorrow he'd wake up and see my name again. Every single day for the rest of his life. Perfect. What would you do with the power to rewrite your own story? Monday morning hit like thunder. I walked into the lobby of what used to be Rowan Global Developments and stopped. Above the reception desk, workers were installing the final letters. CR Design Holdings in brushed steel, catching the morning light like captured fire. My name. My company. My empire built on substance instead of smoke. Adrian arrived 15 minutes later. I wasn't supposed to be there. I'd already moved my office to the executive floor. But I wanted to see his face when he saw those letters. Wanted to witness the moment reality became undeniable. He stood in the doorway, briefcase in hand, staring up at the signage. His face went through a dozen emotions in seconds. Disbelief. Anger. Something that might have been grief. Then his eyes found me standing by the elevators. Celeste. His voice cracked on my name. Adrian. I kept my tone neutral. Professional. You're not supposed to be here. Security was instructed. I know what security was instructed. He walked closer. People in the lobby pretended not to watch, but everyone was watching. I need to get some personal items from my office. You mean my office? And your personal items were already sent to your new address. My new address. He laughed, bitter and broken. A rental apartment 3 floors below the penthouse I paid for. The penthouse where my wife lives. My wife who destroyed everything I built. Your wife who saved what you were destroying. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't need to. And I'm not your wife anymore. Divorce papers were filed Friday. You should be receiving them today. The color drained from his face. Divorce? You can't. We've been married 20 years.
Exactly.
20 years of watching you take credit for my work. 20 years of being called beautiful instead of brilliant. 20 years of silence while you built an empire on my ideas and called it yours. I stepped closer, lowering my voice so only he could hear. I gave you everything, Adrian, and you traded it for applause. I loved you. His voice was barely a whisper. You loved having me. There's a difference. I turned toward the elevator. Goodbye, Adrian. Security will escort you out. I didn't look back as the elevator doors closed. Didn't give him the satisfaction of seeing any emotion on my face. But inside, something shifted. A weight I'd been carrying for 2 decades finally lifting. The executive floor was buzzing when I arrived. My assistant met me at the elevator with coffee and a tablet full of messages. 3 new project proposals, 2 interview requests, and the mayor's office called. They want to discuss urban development initiatives. The mayor's office.
Calling me.
Not Adrian.
Me.
Schedule the mayor's meeting for Friday, I said, walking into my office. Through the windows, Manhattan spread out like a promise. My city now. My opportunities. My future written in steel and glass and possibility. That afternoon, I had lunch with Elena Morrison, an architect who'd worked under Adrian for 5 years. She'd always been talented but invisible, another woman whose ideas got absorbed into Adrian's presentations without credit. "I heard what you did," she said over salad. "Taking over the company. Everyone's talking about it. Let them talk. Some people are saying you're ruthless, that you destroyed your husband out of spite." I set down my fork. "Let me ask you something, Elena. How many of your designs did Adrian present as his own?" She looked away. "Most of them. And when you tried to speak up, he told me I was being emotional, that I needed to be a team player." Her voice was tight with old anger. "He said women who demand credit come across as difficult."
Exactly.
"So when people call me ruthless for taking back what was mine, what they're really saying is that women aren't supposed to fight for themselves. We're supposed to stay quiet and smile and let men build empires on our backs." I leaned forward. "I'm done being quiet, Elena. And I'm hiring. If you want to work somewhere your name goes on your designs, CR Design Holdings has an opening." Her eyes went wide. "Seriously?" "Seriously. I'm building something different here. A company where talent matters more than ego. Where credit goes to the people who earn it. Where brilliant women get called brilliant." I pulled out a business card. "Think about it."
She didn't need to think.
"When do I start?" By the end of the week, I'd hired 3 more people Adrian had overlooked, talented designers and developers who'd been invisible in his shadow. People who understood what it meant to be underestimated. People who were hungry to prove themselves. My new team met Friday afternoon. 8 of us around a conference table, looking at blueprints for projects that would reshape Manhattan's skyline. No one was performing. No one was trying to be the biggest voice. We were just working together, building something real. "This feels different," Marcus said during coffee break. "Adrian's meetings were always about him. These meetings are actually about the work." "That's the point," I said. "Ego is expensive. It costs time, money, and talent. We can't afford it." That evening, I returned to the Penthouse to find a package outside my door. No return address. Inside was a single white rose and a note in Adrian's handwriting. "I understand now what I lost. I'm sorry." I stared at that rose for a long moment, remembered the 12 white roses he'd sent when we first met. The note that said, "Every empire needs an architect." Back then, I'd thought it was romantic. Now I understood it was true, just not the way he'd meant. I had been his architect. I'd designed the foundation he stood on. And when that foundation crumbled under the weight of his corruption, I'd simply stepped aside and let gravity do its work. I threw the rose away without putting it in water. Some gestures come too late to matter.
My phone rang.
Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Celeste Rowan? A woman's voice, professional and warm. Speaking. "This is Catherine Liu from the National Design Institute. We're hosting our annual conference next month, and we'd like you to deliver the keynote speech. The theme is Building Without Boundaries. We thought you'd be perfect." The keynote speech. At the most prestigious design conference in the country. 3 years ago, Adrian had delivered that speech. They'd invited him because of a building I designed. Now, they were inviting me. "I'd be honored," I said. After I hung up, I walked to the balcony. Sunset was painting the city gold and orange, shadows stretching long across streets full of people heading home. Somewhere down there, Adrian was in his rental apartment, looking up at my lights, seeing my name on the building, understanding finally what he'd thrown away. I felt no satisfaction in his pain, no joy in his fall, just a quiet sense of things being exactly as they should be. Balance restored, justice served. Not through revenge, but through simple truth. Good work rises, and ego eventually collapses under its own weight. My assistant texted, "Tomorrow's schedule is packed. You ready?" I typed back, "Always." Below, the city lights began flickering on. One by one, windows glowing like stars, each one representing someone building something, creating something, fighting for something. I was one of them now. Not a shadow. Not an accessory. Just a woman with a vision and the courage to make it real. Adrian had said I wouldn't survive without him. But I wasn't surviving. I was thriving. And that made all the difference. 3 months after the takeover, I sat in a design studio reviewing blueprints for the Tribeca project. Around me, my team worked in focused silence, the good kind, where everyone's too absorbed in creating something excellent to waste energy on performance. Elena was sketching modifications to the residential tower. Marcus was running numbers on sustainable materials. 2 new hires were building a 3D model of the commercial space. No one was fighting for attention. No one was taking credit for others' ideas. We were just building something beautiful together. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Turn on Channel 7 News.
Now.
I grabbed the remote and switched on the TV mounted in the corner. The news anchor was mid-sentence. Investigation into real estate mogul Adrian Rowan's business practices has uncovered significant financial irregularities. Federal prosecutors are reviewing evidence of offshore tax evasion and fraudulent loan applications dating back nearly 5 years. The screen showed Adrian leaving a courthouse, lawyers surrounding him, cameras flashing. He looked smaller somehow. Older. His usual confidence replaced by something that looked like fear. The investigation was reportedly triggered by an anonymous tip, the anchor continued. Rowan's former company, now operating as CR Design Holdings under new leadership, has cooperated fully with authorities. Elena looked up from her sketches. Did you know about this? I knew it was coming, I said quietly. When I found those emails, I forwarded copies to the SEC, anonymously. Not for revenge, just because it was the right thing to do. He could go to prison. He could. I turned off the TV. But that's not my concern anymore. Our concern is this project. Let's get back to work. But I couldn't concentrate. Part of me, the part that had loved him once, that had believed in white roses and shared empires, felt something twist in my chest. Not regret exactly. Maybe just the ghost of what we'd been before everything turned toxic. I excused myself and went to my office. Through the windows, the city stretched endlessly. Somewhere out there, Adrian was facing consequences I'd set in motion. I'd told myself it was about justice, about doing what was right.
And it was.
But it was also about making sure he couldn't hurt anyone else the way he'd hurt me.
My phone rang.
Leland Muir. You saw the news, he said. I saw it. There's more. Adrian's trying to implicate you, claiming you knew about the offshore accounts all along, that you were complicit. Ice flooded through me. That's absurd. I found those emails by accident. I know that. The prosecutors know that. You reported the fraud immediately upon discovery. You're protected.
He paused.
But Adrian's desperate. Desperate people say desperate things. Let him say whatever he wants. The truth is documented.
The truth is, yes.
But public perception is different. Be prepared for some negative press. Some people will believe him because they want to believe the woman who took over her husband's company is the villain. After we hung up, I sat in the silence of my office. This was the price of standing up, of refusing to stay invisible. Some people would always see me as the ruthless wife who destroyed her husband. They'd never see the years of erasure, the stolen credit, the public humiliation. They'd just see a woman who dared to take what was hers and call it wrong. But I'd made peace with that. The next morning, my doorbell rang at 6 a.m. I opened it to find a reporter and cameraman on my doorstep. Ms. Rowan, do you have any comment on your husband's allegations that you were involved in his financial crimes? I could have slammed the door. Could have called security. Instead, I looked directly into the camera. I discovered my husband's fraud and immediately reported it to authorities. I then saved his company from collapse by removing him from leadership. If standing up against corruption makes me a villain, then I'm comfortable being the villain. Now please leave my property. I closed the door gently, firmly. The video went viral within hours. Half the comments called me a hero. The other half called me worse things than I'd ever been called before. I read none of them. That afternoon, I got a call from the mayor's office. Not the assistant this time. The mayor himself. Ms. Rowan, I saw your statement this morning. I want you to know the city stands behind ethical business practices and the courage it takes to expose corruption. We'd like to move forward with our urban development partnership. Thank you, Mayor. That means a lot. Also, he added, my daughter saw your interview. She's in architecture school. She said you're her new role model. After we hung up, I allowed myself one small smile. This was why I'd done it. Not for revenge. Not even for justice, really. For every young woman studying architecture or design or business, wondering if she'd have to choose between being brilliant and being liked. She wouldn't. Not anymore. Not if I had anything to say about it. That evening, I attended a gallery opening for a friend's art show. It was my first social event since the takeover. I debated going. New people would whisper, stare, judge. But hiding felt like admitting I'd done something wrong. I hadn't. I walked in wearing confidence like armor. Heads turned. Conversations paused. But I kept my chin up and my smile steady. A woman approached me near the wine bar. She looked familiar, someone from Adrian's old social circle, though I couldn't remember her name. Celeste, she said warmly. I've been hoping to run into you. I braced myself for judgment. Instead, she hugged me. Thank you, she whispered. My husband treats me the way Adrian treated you. Watching you stand up for yourself gave me courage to see a lawyer. I'm filing for divorce next week. She pulled back, eyes bright with unshed tears. You saved more than a company. You showed women like me that we don't have to disappear. I held her hand. You were never really gone. You were just waiting for permission to be visible again. No, she corrected gently. I was waiting for courage. You gave me that. She walked away, and I stood there processing what she'd said. All this time, I'd thought my story was just mine. Private pain, personal justice. But it wasn't. It had never been. Every woman who'd been dismissed, diminished, erased, they were all part of the story too. Near the end of the night, my phone buzzed. A blocked number. I answered anyway. Celeste. Adrian's voice, rough and tired. Please don't hang up. I should have. But something made me listen. I'm sorry, he said. For everything. For taking credit. For making you invisible. For, his voice broke. For not seeing you until you were gone. Silence stretched between us. 2 decades of marriage reduced to this. A phone call from a blocked number, apologies that came years too late. I forgive you, I said finally. Not because he deserved it. Because I deserved to let it go. But forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. We're done, Adrian. We've been done for a long time. I know. He sounded hollow. I just needed you to know, I finally understand what I lost. Goodbye, Adrian. I hung up before he could respond. Blocked the number. Turned off my phone. Around me, the gallery hummed with conversation and laughter. Art on the walls, wine in glasses, people connecting over shared appreciation of beauty and truth. This was my life now. Not perfect. Not quiet. But mine. All mine. Have you ever had to choose between being kind and being free? The National Design Institute conference was held in Chicago, in a convention center that looked like it was built from glass and ambition. 5,000 architects, designers, and developers from across the country, all gathered to talk about the future of American design. And I was giving the keynote speech. I stood backstage, listening to the opening remarks, feeling my heart hammer against my ribs. 3 years ago, Adrian had stood on this same stage. They'd introduced him as a visionary, a leader, a man reshaping Manhattan's skyline. The applause had been thunderous. Now it was my turn. Ladies and gentlemen, the MC's voice boomed through the speakers. Please welcome the founder and CEO of CR Design Holdings, Celeste Rowan. The applause started before I even walked out. I stepped into the lights, momentarily blinded, then my eyes adjusted. Thousands of faces looking up at me. Waiting, listening, seeing me not as someone's wife, but as someone worth hearing. I walked to the podium and smiled. 3 years ago, my husband stood on the stage and talked about vision. I began. About seeing possibilities others couldn't see. About building empires that would outlast us. He got a standing ovation for that speech. And the building he described, the one that earned him that applause, I designed it. The room went silent. Absolutely silent. I'm not here for applause, I continued. I'm here to talk about something we don't discuss enough in this industry, the cost of invisibility. The price brilliant people pay when ego is valued over ethics. When performance matters more than substance. When taking credit becomes more important than giving it. I clicked to my first slide. A blueprint, one of my early designs for Adrian's company. This is the Riverside Tower. Completed 2018. Architectural Digest called it innovative. The mayor gave it an award for sustainable design. And every article about it mentioned Adrian Rowan as the architect. My name appeared nowhere. Next slide. Another building. Then another. Chelsea Harbor. Brooklyn Commons. The Helix Tower, where I stood 20 years into my marriage and watched my husband mock me in front of Manhattan's elite. All mine. None credited. I looked out at the audience. Some people looked uncomfortable.
Good.
Discomfort meant change. I'm not telling you this for pity. I'm telling you because for every woman in this room, there are 10 more who've had their ideas stolen. Their work absorbed into someone else's portfolio. Their brilliance called beautiful instead of brilliant. I paused. And I'm here to say that ends with us. The applause started small, then built like a wave. Women standing first, then men joining them. Within seconds, the entire room was on their feet. I let it wash over me for a moment, then raised my hand for quiet. The future of design isn't about individual genius. It's about collaboration without erasure. Credit without theft. Building empires where everyone's name is on the work they created. I clicked to my final slide, a rendering of the Tribeca project, with every designer's name listed below it. This is what we're building at CR Design Holdings. And this is what I'm challenging every company in this room to build too. When I finished, the standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. People crowded around the stage afterward, wanting to talk, to share their own stories, to thank me for saying what they'd been thinking for years. An older woman with gray hair and kind eyes gripped my hand. I've been in this industry 40 years. I've watched talented women get erased over and over. Thank you for finally saying it out loud. A young man, maybe 25, looked at me with something like awe. You just changed how I think about my entire career. But the moment that mattered most came from a girl who couldn't have been more than 20. She had a convention badge marking her as a student from MIT. I almost quit architecture school last month, she said quietly. My professor took credit for my senior thesis project. When I complained, he said I was being difficult. I was going to drop out. Tears welled in her eyes. But then I heard about you, about what you did, and I realized that brilliant women don't quit. We build our own empires. I hugged her. What's your name? Maya. Maya, you're going to do incredible things. Don't let anyone make you invisible. That evening, I had dinner with Elena, Marcus, and the rest of my team who'd come to Chicago for the conference. We sat in a restaurant overlooking the river, celebrating not just my speech, but everything we'd accomplished in 6 months. To Celeste, Marcus raised his glass. Who taught us that quiet justice is the loudest kind. We toasted. I looked around the table at these people who'd believed in me when belief was risky, who'd helped build something real from the ashes of something false. My phone buzzed. A news alert. Adrian Rowan reaches plea deal in fraud case. Will serve 18 months minimum security. I read it twice. 18 months. Not the decades he could have faced, but enough. Enough for him to understand that actions have consequences. That corruption catches up. That you can't build empires on other people's silence forever. Everything okay? Elena asked. Everything's perfect, I said, setting my phone down. Let's order dessert. Later, alone in my hotel room, I stood at the window looking out at Chicago's skyline. Different city, same view, millions of lights, millions of stories, millions of people fighting their own battles. I thought about Adrian in whatever apartment he'd moved to after being released on bail. Thought about him packing for prison, facing reality for maybe the first time in his life. Did I feel satisfaction? Vindication?
No.
I felt free. Free from his shadow, his ego, his constant need to be the biggest person in every room. Free from performing, from making myself small, from pretending that beautiful was enough when brilliant was what I'd always been.
My phone rang.
A blocked number. I almost didn't answer. But I did. Ms. Rowan. A man's voice. Unfamiliar. This is James Chun, representing the American Institute of Architects. We'd like to award you our Lifetime Achievement Award at next year's ceremony for your contributions to design and for advancing women in the field. Lifetime Achievement, the highest honor in American architecture. Adrian had been nominated 3 times and never won. I'd be honored, I managed to say. After we hung up, I sat on the hotel bed and let myself feel it. All of it. The pain of those 20 years. The humiliation of that birthday party. The fear when I'd first found those emails. The courage it took to sign my name on documents that would change everything. And the overwhelming, beautiful satisfaction of knowing I'd done it. I'd reclaimed myself. I'd built something real. I'd shown my daughter, the world's daughters, that brilliance doesn't need permission. I pulled out my laptop and opened a new document. Started typing. Chapter 1. The Woman Who Rebuilt Herself. It was time to tell my story. The whole story. Not for revenge or vindication, but so that every woman who'd ever been made invisible would know. You can rebuild. You can rise. You can take back everything they stole and make it better than it ever was. Outside my window, Chicago glowed like possibility. And inside, I finally felt like myself again. What would you build if you weren't afraid? 3 floors down, he looked up at my lights every night. I see your name on the building every day, Adrian said softly. It's the first thing I see each morning and the last before I close my curtains. I know, I replied. No cruelty, just truth. He turned to me, searching my face. Are you happy? I looked past him, out at Manhattan glowing beneath us, the Tribeca project shining with my name, the office where my team still worked late, building beauty and meaning together. I'm free, I said. That's better than happy. He nodded slowly, understanding too late. I won't bother you again. I just needed to say I'm sorry. That I see you now. That I finally understand what I had. Apology noted, I said. Goodbye, Adrian. He hesitated at the elevator. For what it's worth, I'm proud of what you built, even if it meant destroying me. I didn't destroy you, I told him. I stopped propping you up. The doors closed. The sound of the elevator fading felt like the last echo of my old life disappearing into silence. When it was gone, Elena stepped out of the kitchen. You okay? I'm perfect. That night, I opened the letter he'd left. Pages of regret, self-awareness, confession. On the last page, he'd written, You asked me once what I loved. I said power and applause. I should have said you. By the time I realized that, you'd already learned to love yourself enough to leave. The real tragedy isn't losing my empire. It's losing you before I ever saw you. You were always the architect. I was only the man standing in your light. I folded the letter and put it away, not to hold on to, but to remember how far I'd come. The next morning, the Tribeca ribbon-cutting ceremony drew hundreds, press, investors, officials, students. Not just to unveil a building, but to celebrate a new kind of legacy. One that gave credit where it was due. This building represents more than architecture, I said into the microphone. It represents what happens when ego steps aside for excellence. When we build together instead of on top of each other. Applause rippled through the crowd. Cameras flashed. My team surrounded me, Elena, Marcus, the people who had believed when belief was hard. Afterward, a nervous young woman approached me. Ms. Rowan? I'm graduating soon with an architecture degree. I was wondering if CR Design Holdings is hiring. What's your name? I asked. Sarah Chun. Tell me, Sarah, if you design something brilliant, would you be okay with someone else taking credit for it? She frowned. No. Of course not. Good answer. I handed her my card. Send me your portfolio. We need people who know their names matter. Her eyes shone. You're my hero. You showed us we don't have to stay quiet. We were never meant to be quiet, I said gently. We were just told we should be. As she walked away, something settled in me. Peace, purpose, legacy. This was what I was truly building, a world where women didn't have to vanish to succeed, where talent wasn't dimmed to flatter a man's light. That evening, I stood on my balcony, wine in hand, as the sunset painted the city gold. The same view where, a year ago, Adrian had mocked me in front of his guests. The same balcony where I'd whispered, "Let's see who laughs last." Nobody was laughing now. Below, his apartment lights flickered on. I wondered if he replayed our years together. Realizing the moment, everything shifted. Realizing that the empire built on my silence was never meant to stand. My phone buzzed, a message from the American Institute of Architects. "Congratulations, Ms. Rowan. Lifetime Achievement Award confirmed." I smiled. The view was perfect, not because it reminded me of his fall, but because it reflected my rise. My name etched into skylines. My company thriving. My team creating beauty, not power plays. Sometimes revenge isn't loud. It's the quiet click of a new door unlocking. The silent satisfaction of standing in the place they said you'd never reach, and building something better. I raised my glass. To every woman who was told she wasn't enough, I whispered. To every voice silenced. To every brilliant mind called beautiful instead. This view is for you. The city lights blinked back like they understood. And somewhere below, Adrian turned off his lights. Tomorrow he'd wake and see my name again, blazing across the skyline. Every single day, a reminder of what he'd lost, what he'd underestimated, what he'd never deserved to keep. Quiet justice indeed. I finished my wine and walked inside. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new creations. But tonight, I simply existed in the peace I'd earned. The trembling woman from that party, the one holding champagne and shame, was gone. In her place stood someone unshakable. Someone who'd learned that true power doesn't roar. It stands firm, proven in results, built brick by brick on the foundation of self-belief. I had spent 20 years being told my worth depended on his recognition. 20 years shrinking so he could shine. 20 years invisible. But I was done being invisible. Now the skyline bore my initials, my design, my name. And the women who came after me wouldn't have to choose between silence and success. They could have both. I looked at my reflection against the glittering glass, my empire glowing behind me, my future ahead. Adrian once sent me roses with a note that read, "Every empire needs an architect."
He was right about that.
He just never understood. I was never meant to build his. I was always meant to build my own. What story will you tell with your life? What empire will you build from your silence? Thank you for being part of this journey. Subscribe, share, and join our family of builders, fighters, and dreamers who know that quiet justice is the loudest kind. Keep building your empire, one brave decision at a time.